Tomb Raider is one of the most iconic video game franchises of all time, with also one of the most iconic characters in video games, Lara Croft. With the original Tomb Raider coming out 20 years ago and coincidentally a new triad, the IP being born right now, the franchise has had some truly high highs and some Mariana Trench deep lows. Lara Croft has gone from a definitive adventurer making Indiana Jones shake while pushing the 90s hardware to an over-sexualized broken symbol in gaming to a reborn adventurer back to raiding tombs and holding that icon title. We'll be looking at the reboot trilogy of Lara Croft's character that tried to make her great again, from the story to the innovations and of course the main part of a game, the gameplay. So get your beverage of choice ready, snacks by your hands, and let's see if it is worth playing the Tomb Raider reboot trilogy in 2026. First though, before we get into the reboot, let's do a little recap on the state of Tomb Raider franchise before the reboot launched. Feel free to skip to this timestamp where we begin on the trilogy. Alright, the original Tomb Raider came out in 1996, being quite a revolutionary title in the gaming space, bringing the action-adventure in video games to the masses and doing it great as well. From the incredibly unique level designs, inclusion of a story, although a bit of a cheesy one, gameplay-centric puzzles, and more. Because of this, the game was adored and loved by the critics, greenlighting a sequel immediately. But here already the cracks were showing, with the creator of Lara Croft, Toby Gard, leaving the project because of the misuse of the character in marketing, where Lara was exploited in unapproved marketing more as a sex symbol than a strong and independent adventurer, and unfortunately, this would only get worse after he left. Even with all of this though, Tomb Raider 2 released in the next year after the original and mostly improved on the original's formula, with a slight improvement in every aspect, like various game mechanics, environments, graphics, etc. The game did become more action-focused, which did lead to it performing slightly worse than its prequel. But overall, because of the huge success of the first game, another sequel was quickly pushed. And notice how I said quickly. Tomb Raider 3 was once again pushed by the publisher to be released the next year after Tomb Raider 2, which made it a yearly release like some kind of a Ubisoft title. This meant that once again, the game largely just had simple improvements over the past entry, making critics notice how the game started to become just repetitive. With this though, the franchise was still alive and well, but its developers were not. Because of the constant push for releasing new titles and the want to move on to something new, the developers decided to kill off Lara Croft in the fourth game, Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation. This decision made the publishers very angry because they did not know about it, with fans being sad as well that a new character that they just got attached to was already gone. The game itself mostly returned to the original structure while also hugely improving on all aspects visually and gameplay-wise, making it easily outperform Tomb Raider 2 and 3. It was basically a true successor to the original while also being the intended ending. This though didn't stop from another game being made, purely from the backlash of the publishers and fans to the developers. So how do you revive Lara? Well, they didn't. They made a game called Tomb Raider Chronicles, which was basically a flashback episode in the year 2000 of the supposed adventures Lara had before Tomb Raider 4, where she dies. And it was not good. Although a technical upgrade, it was more of a stealth action game like a Metal Gear Solid, which didn't make sense because the game originally wasn't meant to be an action game in any sense or meaning. It just felt out of place, and tomb raiding was just not really there for a game called Tomb Raider. Even with all of that, overall the Tomb Raider franchise was still doing good, so another sequel was being made, and this was the final one by the original developer team. And well, while being the most technically advanced, it was also the most technically broken, and we are talking about The Angel of Darkness. Released in 2003, this was the most not Tomb Raider feeling Tomb Raider game. With the sheer broken nature of the game and the original developers leaving, it seemed like this was the end of Tomb Raider. Publishers were not done though, and this leads us to the first reboot of Tomb Raider by Crystal Dynamics, releasing a brand new trilogy starting with Tomb Raider Legend. And this was a massive critical success, even with the fact that the game was more action and story oriented. This time, it was actually done proper, reviving the then dying franchise. And well, they continued. You wanted more focus on tomb raiding? Well, there you go, Tomb Raider Anniversary, a game that combined the technology of today, at the time when it was made, with the ideas and feel from the original, making a fantastic game, pleasing both the fans and the critics by having more focus on the quiet moments of the game. And the question might be, did they go 3 for 3? And yes, they did. Tomb Raider Underworld was a third of the trilogy, and just like Tomb Raider Legends, focused more on the spectacle than tomb raiding. It still gave a good enough balance on tombs in between the action, while also introducing plenty enough of new features and visuals that made it well received. Problem was, they were not the only action-adventure titan anymore, as this is the time Uncharted was also born, and with the lackluster sales from not regaining all the audience from the flop that was the previous two entries, and Underworld being the trilogy ending, it didn't seem like we would get any more Tomb Raider. Up until then, the publisher of Tomb Raider series was Eidos, but that changed in 2009 as Eidos got bought off by Square Enix, and they had some huge plans for the franchise. So with that, it was up to Square Enix to revive the franchise with Tomb Raider 2013. And they did not hold back on the reboot toggle as they completely remade the Lara Croft character from zero, giving her a completely new beginning to her story, a brand new physical appearance with at the time quite revolutionary hair physics, which actually became quite a reoccurring staple of the trilogy, with each title implementing some brand new advancements in visual presentation technology that would trickle down to other huge AAA titles. It also was incredibly well optimized, which is a thing you hear less and less frequently as time goes forward. I remember watching old Linus Tech Tips videos where they outright just said that they will stop testing the game for some specific scenarios as there would be no performance difference. I also remember my first playthrough of the game being on complete potato hardware, and I still enjoyed the heck of it because, well, the gameplay was great. You see, Tomb Raider 2013 begins with Lara Croft, an archaeologist, on an expedition that goes wrong. As in search of a lost city, due to some incredibly harsh weather, the ship meant for getting to the city gets pulled into a lethal storm. This, though, turns out to be a blessing in disguise, as the shore that Lara gets washed up on, coincidentally, is the island where the city is located. But honestly, I am using the word blessing lightly. As with the rebrand of Lara Croft, Square Enix decided to not hold back on the things Lara goes through to become the action hero we know. Just in the beginning few hours, even minutes, she survives a sinking ship from a storm, gets knocked out and captured, burns herself, falls onto a steel rod, gets almost squished by a cave-in, her leg gets caught in a bear trap, once again gets captured, but this time by the surviving cult people of the island, by whom she almost gets assaulted, making her fight for her life, killing a person for the first time in her life, and this is just the very setup to the game. In all honesty, the character growth of Lara in this game is done great. In my opinion, Lara's reaction to the ongoing situations within the game are done well as her improvement within her skills throughout the game, which to the player is portrayed by unlocking the different skills using skill points. And in that regard, it is all fine and dandy. I can't really say that about the other characters, as in my opinion, although we are shown Lara's deep care for her friends, we don't really experience any of that as the players themselves. So in the end, the supporting cast feels a bit bland, but that's okay as the game's main focus is supposed to be Lara. Same can also be said about the bad guys / villains, although you do learn a bit more about the main villain, aka the cult leader, Father Messias. In the end, he just comes off as a generic bad guy, and the less said about his followers, the better. All I can say, you won't feel bad about killing them. Either way, as the game goes on, you find out that the storm that destroyed the your ship was from a supernatural influence, which is the main cult's belief, and Lara decides to put an end to it all by solving the mystery, that way stopping the cult and making it possible to leave the island and ending the first chapter of the trilogy. Honestly, replaying the game now, the brutality of many scenes and quite graphic environments actually caught me off guard. I really wasn't ready for some of the scenes and events that happened throughout the game, and turns out it was all a phase of the early edgy 2010s and actually a return to form, as the originals were actually quite brutal to Lara if players made any mistakes. I do think that the generic 7th gen console super gray filter is a bit too much, as it just makes the game look less alive, depressing, and serious, aka realistic but not really. Gameplay wise, playing it was just plain fun. The gunplay starting with the bow feels good. It has also been made the weapon of choice for Lara throughout the trilogy, being useful not just for combat but later on also for traversing to new areas in game. The other weapons also feel good, each having their own unique characteristics and traversing benefits, for example the shotgun being able to shoot out through some wood barriers, unlocking you new areas. As mentioned before, you unlock different skills and there is a nice upgrade path for all the weapons as well. And that's not it. Early in the game you unlock the climbing axe, which is mainly used for climbing but also becomes quite a weapon, boosting the dodging and countering mechanic that in theory is simple yet requiring some skill. Somehow, the climbing itself feels smooth yet clunky at the same time. Even more though, throughout the game, there is a bunch of side activities like tombs to explore as you go along with the mainline story, and there are many little treasures and challenges you can find along the way, giving you something to do throughout the main story completion. I will say though, after completing the game, it does feel quite clunky and slow to explore anything extra, mainly because of the lack of sprint options, so I do highly recommend to do the extra tombs as you are playing, as some of them have great rewards with mechanically cool and interesting puzzles. Also, for some reason, stealth is a bit wonky in this game. Although you can sneak by and stealth kill, the moment you get seen or alert an enemy, they will know your location 24/7. So up until that moment, the stealth ain't that bad, but do be aware that the moment a shootout starts, it won't end until either Lara dies or all the enemies. With that, in total, the story of Lara is great, but because of the lacking side characters and bland villains, I will remove a point for each of those and give it an 8 out of 10. Visuals are a bit dated, maxed out on PC they don't look bad, but the desaturated filter makes everything look a bit bland, which is a bit sad as there are quite a few breathtaking locations and some really realistic looking sequences. Overall, I will give it a 7 out of 10, and for the gameplay, it is just fun. The traversing within the story scope is fine, but if you do the tombs as you play through, there isn't really any point of returning to the island, and because of that, the somewhat clunky movement, I will end on a 7 out of 10 in that regard. Another thing I didn't mention was the difficulty. I played the game on hard, and if this is your first time playing this game, stay away from this setting and just play on normal. The game's standard difficulty has a good balance, but in hard you die basically in 2 hits, which does bring the realism up, as Lara is not this battle-hardened action hero here, and it shouldn't take a lot to take her down, and as a result it would make you play smarter and use the skills Lara has to get the advantage in otherwise grim outlooking scenarios, but man can it make some of the encounters just plain frustrating.
Some kind of marker. Can't quite make out the translation, but this word. Prophet. This is it.
Rise of the Tomb Raider originally launched exclusively on Xbox consoles, but you don't need to worry about that, as just a year later it was available everywhere else. And you know what? In my opinion, this might be the best out of the trilogy. Basically just improving on everything that the first game built on in every possible way. Starting with the story. Rise of the Tomb Raider continues the story from the 2013 title. With Lara now believing in the supernatural from the events on the island, she realizes her father was not crazy. As throughout the game and available DLC that comes with the game, you find out that Lara had a happy family until her mother passed away in a plane crash. Her dad, a famous archaeologist, figured there would be a way to bring her back to life, and with that, simultaneously buries his legacy and respect, as everyone thought he went crazy from believing in all this immortality stuff, chasing ghosts and not letting go of his wife, until he just Yeah, but Lara now knows he was right and he was not crazy, so she is on a path of his last adventure to bring back her father's honor and legacy. In all fairness, the story is plainly done better. There is more focus on everything around Lara and not just her. The villain now has clearer motives. We also get more focus on Jonah, who is the only reoccurring character of Lara's friends from the boat in the 2013 title. And there is now more focus on him, so we actually care about him. The same can also be said about the side characters that you meet later in the game, each having their own motives and personalities. Visually, they did turn down the gore in comparison to the first one, and yes, Lara is still getting put through some painful situations, but there is just less visual brutality or gore like in the 2013 title. This was also a next-gen video game at the time, so visually to this day it looks amazing. Fully maxed out on PC, you could easily fool people into thinking how this game is not 11 years old, but came out not that long ago. There are also some visual changes to Lara while still having the same voice actress, so the character itself doesn't feel that different, but just looks more lifelike. Another huge improvement is in the environment detail, being not just better looking, more colorful, and more full of things, but also much larger in general. The big visual advancement they did with this title was in environment reaction to the player. For example, how snow moves away from Lara. This was not done at such scale before. So the story is done better, visuals and environment are better, and yes, gameplay is also much better. Starting with the movement, you now have the option to sprint, which makes traversing the larger environments much better. Also added are other ways of moving around, like grapple swinging, climbing on arrows, or even swimming, to add more exploration. Also, in general, climbing feels smoother and faster compared to 2013. Your movement can also be impacted by the environment, like thick snow, for example, will make Lara move slower. There's also changes to the weapons. You now have more of them, with more detailed individual upgrade paths that make the varying weapons feel significantly different with different upgrades or mods. Once again, the bow is the weapon of choice for Lara, but this time it felt quite weak in comparison to the previous title. Honestly saying, after getting the handgun and equipping a silencer on it, it kinda makes the bow useless, if not for some specific scenarios, with the only positive feature being the different arrows, like the poison arrows. But how do you get them? Well, dear viewers, that's where another new feature comes in, which is crafting. You now have different materials and things you can obtain throughout the world you explore in Rise of the Tomb Raider. And this also applies to the upgrades. Outside of that, there is also the shop where you can buy specific weapon mods, weapons, and other things. Combat itself feels quite familiar to 2013, which is good as it was great in that game, while adding a few more new takedown moves. Stealth is actually here and it's pretty good. It's basically been completely revamped with different ways of sneaking around, like bushes, vertical climbing trees, etc. The tombs of Tomb Raider have been largely improved as well, being just as puzzling, if not being even more interesting than the 2013 title, while being way more breathtaking and visually interesting. There are also languages that you learn, crypts, monoliths, and other things you can find in the world of the sequel. Also in Tomb Raider 2013 you had different outfits, but outside of a visual change to Lara, there was nothing to them. Well, in Rise of the Tomb Raider you can unlock different outfits that can give you various different passive boosts. The only thing I will take down a point for is, well, basically because the environments are much bigger, they are reused, which in itself is not bad, but this does mean that some bonus tombs that you would like to explore there and then, in that moment, won't be available because, well, you won't have the right gear to unlock them, which can put off from exploring extra, as you might think that all of this is for later. The thing is, even though this is true to some point, unlike the 2013 title, it is actually fun to explore the map and the bonus content after the game's completion. Some of the tombs and DLC, like, there is a whole bonus storyline available, the Baba Yaga side quest, and it is so interesting that I decided to do a whole bonus stream exploring it all, and I did not regret doing that, and it was a whole bunch of fun. In general, Rise of the Tomb Raider is all over improvement on the 2013 title. The story is complete, plus all the DLC content is so much that I gotta give it a 10 out of 10. The gameplay now feels smooth in every way, and there just is so much of it to enjoy. But I will take off a point for the dangling of parts you can't access early on, 9 out of 10. And visuals bring us to the next generation with no dumb gray filter over everything and look stunning. I will say there is a slight pixelation that is fixed in the third title, so I will end up on a 9 out of 10 as well. So quickly before we end, I wanted to say that I played this title also on hard difficulty, but this time it didn't feel as brutal as the 2013 title. Mainly because you have a healing mechanic from the previously mentioned crafting, so you can basically craft heals and that way you can heal in combat and it feels much easier to play. So if you decide to play on hard, feel free to do that. There's also like some extra difficulty mode. Either way, it didn't feel as hard as the first game. But where do you go from here? Shadow of the Tomb Raider is by theory and by technicality the best video game of the trilogy, and also the worst Tomb Raider of the three. I know this might sound a little confusing now, but let me explain why this is the best video game and the worst Tomb Raider at the same time. And it basically boils down to the improvements having no heft to them. So first of all, the story, it is a continuation of the previous part, and all the individual story-related parts of it are amazing, except for one, and I'll get to it in a moment. But basically, the villain might be the best of them all, with the most clear-cut self-motivation. There is even more focus on the people around Lara. Jonah has an even larger role with more detailed focus and a new arc for him, becoming the moral compass for Lara. There are personal stakes against the villain for the rest of the side cast you meet later on, giving them more weight and care. So all these individual parts of the story are really well done, except the story itself doesn't really have anything good going for it. And in the end, none of it really clicks. You see, Tomb Raider 2013 focused on Lara and her becoming our hero, becoming battle-hardened. Rise of the Tomb Raider focused on her dealing with her past, growing as a person, and for the first time, dealing with Trinity. And Shadow of the Tomb Raider is once again battle-hardening Lara while giving her the same character growth like in Rise of the Tomb Raider, except we already went through that before. So in the end, if you have played both previous titles, it just feels like you have already done this. And the same goes for everything else in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This title basically is Tomb Raider 2013 and Rise of the Tomb Raider mixed together while adding some small improvements. For example, once again, the gameplay is a perfect copy of Rise of the Tomb Raider, all the same mechanics, but now you can rappel down and wall run. So there is something new to the movement. You can also now cover yourself in mud, getting some extra cool stealth points from me, and there are some cool new takedown moves, making Lara a bit more brutal in this one. Otherwise, gameplay-wise, everything else is literally the same. You still have extra tombs, languages, monoliths, crypts, etc. I will say that the single-player part of the game had way more puzzles and tombs in it compared to the rest of the trilogy. This game also brings back some of the more gory nature, just like Tomb Raider 2013 did, but now it looks extra graphic with the all-new next-gen look. And talking about the graphics, they are quite similar to Rise of the Tomb Raider, but with a slight improvement all around. The big technical advancement with this title being ray tracing. Yes, being one of the first ever games to have this revolutionary tech. This also means that out of the trilogy, although being an 8-year-old game, there is a possibility you might not play this at max settings. So that is basically it for Shadow of the Tomb Raider. There isn't really much to talk about. By technicality, it is the best video game of the trilogy, but because of its large similarities to the previous two titles, it just feels out of place. Yes, story-wise, individually, it is the best one, but when you take into consideration the previous titles, it feels like the weakest. Same goes for gameplay. It is the final complete package, combining all the mechanics from the previous ones and adding some new ones. But once again, at the end, if you have played the previous two titles, it won't feel any different and might just feel repetitive and boring. And for the visuals, it is just plain the best one and most visually impressive, but at the cost of ray tracing, which might not be available for everyone. I don't know. So if I had to rank it individually, the score would be a 10 out of 10. You know, it's higher than Rise of the Tomb Raider. But when I compare it with the other titles, I would remove some points for the lack of innovation and the rehash of Lara's growth. How many points get deducted are up to you, ladies and gentlemen. As for some people, it might not be a minus, you know, as they are just getting more of the same that they like. But for some, it might be a major turnoff. So in conclusion, the Survivor Lara trilogy is a bunch of fun, with a well-written story, fun diverse gameplay, and beautiful visuals. If I had to recommend, if you want to play just one game, go for the Shadow of the Tomb Raider or Rise of the Tomb Raider. Those are the most complete packages, and afterwards, if you are hooked, go for the other two titles, whichever ones you didn't play. Otherwise, I would start with Tomb Raider 2013, then Rise of the Tomb Raider, and if it's on discount and you really want to finish off the trilogy, play Shadow of the Tomb Raider as well. With that said, please leave a like, subscribe, and of course leave a comment. I read all of them and I like the different discussions that sometimes appear there. Of course, I do stream all the games I make videos about, so feel free to join in next time I'm live, or check out some of my previous streams, or even watch my full playthroughs. It's a huge help for a small channel like mine if you watch those playthroughs. But until then, see ya in the next one. Bye bye.